I'm delighted to welcome Meinhard Schmidt today, who is a board member and chair with more than 25 years of applied global healthcare diagnostics and medtech experience. Meinhard has delivered transformational change within several blue chip healthcare corporations, including Roche and Philips, as well as startups, to develop an expertise in innovation, industrialization, commercialization, and digitalization. Most recently, he was appointed through new role, chair of Perfood, a Germany-based digital therapeutics startup that translates state-of-the-art data and medical science into therapy. He is also chair at Oncommune plc, a leader in immune biomarkers with the vision to enable personalized, data-driven clinical decisions across the cancer care continuum. And he's also an advisory board member at Bright Insight, the leading global platform for biopharma and medtech regulated digital health solutions. A huge welcome to you, Meinhard. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
No, thank you very much, Oliver, for this very nice introduction. And glad to be here and look forward to this hour of discussion on our activities.
Fantastic. Well, I'd love to start with a little bit about your story, and how you got to be where you are today. And particularly, I'd like to zone in on the Oncommune plc journey, which sounds like a fascinating story.
Yeah, it is definitely a fascinating story. It's a story which started in 2016. I was appointed at that time as the chairman. Oncommune is actually a leading immunodiagnostic developer, primarily focusing on the growing fields of immuno-oncology, autoimmune disease, and infectious disease. This idea was started actually back in 2002 when three guys had this brilliant idea to support with financial means some bright developers, and they were believing in the very early detection of cancer. And this journey led in 2012 to the first launch of a product which was called early cancer detection for lung cancer. And this was a diagnostic blood test, and so purely focusing on the diagnostic world. I joined the company in 2016, as I said, and the first step was actually to bring this company to a listing at the London Stock Exchange at AIM, and so not really focusing on the technology, not really focusing on the commercial part, but much more on the strategic direction from a financial perspective. What that started was actually a very changing time of ups and downs, where also my role as a chair was changing from non-ex to an executive chair for a certain period of time, active involvement in the rollout of strategy and commercialization, and changing during this time actually as a chair both the executive team and also huge part of the board. The interesting thing is that Oncommune is a fantastic story of an example of a transition of a purely diagnostic blood test, blood biomarker company focusing on this kind of selling tests over the counter into a service provider. And that is actually what we did during the last 2.5 years. Together with the new appointed CEO, we were looking into the future of the company, and what we understood was that the future of diagnostics is actually in services. The future of diagnostics is actually in the field of companion diagnostics, and that is what we did. We took it up. We took this journey, and today we realized a massive transition and a new value proposition for the company. We are now not seen anymore as a diagnostic company, but as a pharma and life science service provider. And just to give you one example, we are currently dealing with seven of the top 10 pharmaceutical companies in the world, providing services based on our immunodiagnostic platform.
Wow, fantastic! And you talked there about the change in your role from non-executive chair to chair. It's something we see a lot of startups really wrestling with, the role of the chair. And often when I talk to founders who are struggling with their boards, the problem is normally the chair, and they don't always realize that, but the chair is failing to do the chair's role. How can you talk a little bit more about how you made that transition from non-executive to executive chair, and what the implications were?
First of all, I have to say it was not just a step from non-exec to exec, but also back to non-exec, because it was at a time when the CEO and I we decided, and it was very simple. The CEO said, "Look, let me focus on the US. I focus and I, the chair, was focusing on China, building up the commercial traction there." I think that is has to do with my personal ambition as an NED or as an MEC, and I prefer to take a very active role in my boards. And I'm always saying that my work is actually taking place between the board meetings. And so I prefer an active involvement, not with the intention to become an executive of the company, but really working together with the foremost with the CEO, obviously, but also with the executive team, being a coach for them, being a partner for them, and helping them to execute the strategy which they have actually been given by the board.
And tangibly speaking, what does that actually mean in practice? Can you give some examples?
That I think it's best described in the way that the frequency of contacts which we have, the actions, what the interactions between the executive team and the chair, but also the involvement of the chair. For example, if we go on a roadshow, that is I'm involved there. If we go to open the doors for certain customers, I will be there, and always, of course, on request of the executive team. If we go in and enter into M&A ideas, that is also a joint effort where the chair steps down to into a somewhat operational level and is supporting the team in the best way, hopefully.
Got it. And what about you? You touched a little bit there on coaching, which is always an interesting one. I know a lot of founders who have independent coaches and some who use their chair as a coach. How do you operate as a coach?
This is that's a very good question because I think it highly depends on the CEO. I mean, you have so mature CEOs that coaching is actually the wrong word. It would not be respectful enough. You can give some advice. You have eventually complementary experience. You have longer experience than a startup CEO. That's clear. And but in my experience is that it is more in acting as a sounding board in certain questions are coming up. For example, in my new role here with Perfect, it's a very young team, and so they are coming with totally different questions than a mature CEO from a life science business and from a mature business.
And where do you think you sort of add most value as a chair in that role? What are the sorts of areas that you think move the needle most for a founder, an inexperienced founder?
I think it is with the background of having been involved in big corporates like starting many years ago with Philips and moving over to many years with Roche Diagnostics, so a giant or the leader in the diagnostics business, and then also being involved in companies like Straumann, the leader in dental implantology. You can add a lot of translation into this smaller environment. What I mean with this is, for example, when you look into the startup companies, and I'm doing this now since more than 11 years, working more or less exclusively with startup companies in the field, they are lacking the processes, and you cannot upgrade these processes from an startup company into a big corporate, but you can transfer this from a big corporate organization, lean it down, and then that is one of the added values. The other, I think, even more of an added value for the executive team and acting as a chair is the network.
Yeah.
Which I'm very thankful to this, but being more than 25 years in this industry, you know more or less each and everybody, and opening the doors for these of the executive teams, for the startup managers. That's always a pleasure, but it's also something what is taken very gratefully.
Yeah, I think that I often have seen that as an investor, it sort of can be transformational, and I think often founders struggle with that when they're sort of starting to think about taking on a board. They worry about the cost, and they don't realize that a good board member will pay back multiple fold just through their introductions alone, if they're any good. But going back to the sort of those processes that you talked about, can you give a sort of specific example of where you were able to bring that slimmed down process from the sort of your corporate experience into a startup and it had a sort of beneficial impact?
So let's use our joint or common example of Perfood. As you mentioned, I joined Perfood 6 months ago as the chairman of this of their board, and first instance it was, of course, this is a very exciting business, and we may come to this later, the therapeutics business. But of course, Perfood is very fast growing company. They started actually in 2017, and it's actually, as every digital health company, they grow and grow and grow. And by doing this, certain things are forgotten, or you don't have the time, simply don't have the time to do this. So what what I introduced as one of the first steps from a governance point of view were actually committees and a new compensation and incentive plan and structure. So and this is a typical example where you have, of course, obviously totally different committees. This organization is not in a situation where you would need a separate REMCOM and a nomination committee. So you put it all together. You don't need already now an audit committee, but what we have done is actually we installed strategy committees, so a subset of the board, including the executive team, and this was very well taken and is very efficient and very effective. And the same with the compensation and incentive structure. You can easily take it from a big corporate, transfer this into lean this down, and then you have all of a sudden you have a motivating and future-based incentive structure with clear pay grades, with clear bonus systems, and which actually, and also a benchmarked salary system, which allows you to track also talent, which you would like to see in such a highly innovative environment.
Got it. I love that. Love the idea of the strategy committee, because it's one of the areas that I think startups often really wrestle with, this sort of slightly woolly concept of strategy. And often they sort of feel like they go through this huge exercise and then 1 week later, it's all forgotten and they're back to the daily grind of just trying to grow the business. Can you tell us a bit more about how that strategy committee worked? Who was on it, and what follow through have you put in place in order to make that effective?
This is when we go for this for this kind of strategy groups. I will always take care that there's a healthy balance. What you normally not always will find in a startup board, and what I mean with this is a healthy balance between the industry experts or the corporate experts and the investors. So there should be nobody should dominate this. So there should be no domination by the investor side. That the strategy, which is actually created and defined in this working group, that this is dominated by financial objectives. And the same also from the strategy side, when there are the guys with the biggest knowledge about technology, industry knowledge, should also not be dominated by technology-driven component only. So, and that is one of the things where I'm very keen on, that there's a healthy balance. And the second part is what is also important next to the balance in this working group is actually the involvement of the people who have to do it afterwards. So it's an iterative process of defining the strategy together, and then involving the executive team, not at a later stage, but from the very beginning, collecting their input, collecting their information, because a board or a working group focusing on strategy doesn't work if you just throw the outcome over the wall towards the executive and tell them, okay, good guys, this is what your board is setting as a plan for the next years, and now please execute.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot, where you have the sort of the board who have the most brilliant strategy, but then you go and ask, the person on the shop floor, and they've got absolutely no idea what's going on, because as you say, it hasn't been. So how do you embed that? What are your sort of tricks and tips for boards and chairs trying to embed a strategy?
There's first of all, I must say that my experience is that when you create next to the committees of your board these kind of working groups, it is the biggest difficulty which I have experienced is actually that you have to say no to some board members who want to join, and so I think the willingness is definitely there, and that's one trigger. The other one is, and it may be based on my Swiss character, as here in Switzerland, we have a different understanding of the work together between the chair and the CEO. It's always very close. There's a clear distinction between the roles, between the chair and the CEO. The chair is solely responsible for the setting the strategy, and the CEO is responsible for the execution of the strategy. But I prefer the work to do this as a chair together with the CEO, with the team, work on the strategy, propose this in the first instance to the board, discuss, and then get the mandate back to the executive team. But once again, this is all based on this intention to have it done in the most constant way and cooperative way. And as I said, it may be too Swiss.
Fantastic, love it. Now you touched earlier on digital therapeutics, which I know is a bit of a game changer. I'd love to hear more about that. How do you see that playing out in the coming years?
That this is one of my favorite questions, actually, because I have spent my entire life in the healthcare business, was actually in one or the other way, parallel or directly affected by the digitalization processes. So the outcome of first digital steps in diabetes care, where we changed the notebooks and we brought some software into the blood glucose meters. Then the next point were medical expert systems in our laboratory environment. Then finally, I did a huge step by accepting the job as a head of business unit at Straumann in the dental industry. So, and with all respect, but dental industry is not really innovative. But at that point in time, it was back in 2008. They were actually playing with this idea that there's a clear trend towards digitalization of the dental industry. So what these guys did, they bought some software companies, and then they figured out, okay, with software, it's a different beast, and it's not that easy to integrate this and to merge this with your typical hardware-oriented businesses. And we did then a spin-off. I took over as the CEO for this software company for a while, but this is now ongoing, and what we have seen is there were a lot of other industries were of course far ahead of the healthcare industry, medtech business. But so digital health has always been on my agenda, and I'm a strong believer that digitalization and software will become a game changer also now for this industry in this century. And if there is one good thing in what we have seen in the last 2 years during the COVID crisis, is that the last 2 years with COVID have actually accelerated the digitalization by 10 years within 6 months. 6 weeks. And when it now comes to digital therapeutics is at the very forefront of digital health. Digital therapeutics are how can we best describe it? Are evidence-based, software-driven interventions designed to treat a disease actually by improving a particular clinical outcome. And this is focusing then not so much on the typical clinical outcomes of a drug. This is focusing on complementary to drugs in the field of behavioral changes and personalized medicine. So, digital therapeutics is actually a new class of therapies that is currently reshaping the structure and the management of treatment for a complete set of chronic diseases. And that includes diabetes type 2, that includes Alzheimer, that includes dementia, heart failure, and that includes also diabetes or obesity. And definitely in these fields, because you can imagine when it comes to behavioral changes, a drug will not help there. But when you really go to the patient, and finally also other things like ADHD and or migraine. And I can now, when we look to my company in Germany, Perfect is now the leading company of digital therapeutic for migraine. This is the first product which rolls out from their platform, and this is clearly based on clinical outcome, and that is also very important for me that we are not talking here about apps or some additional software which you just put on your mobile phone, and then all of a sudden you will become more healthy. It is actually it has to show a medical grade. It has to take place in a regulated environment, and it has to be focused on a reimbursement pathway. And just to give you one idea, the digital therapeutic process at Perfect with the first product of migraine is leading to, and it is clinical based. It is after the clinical studies, is leading to a reduction of the migraine days. Migraine days is the matrix for the people suffering from migraine by 63%. So this is one of the typical examples, and digital therapeutics is now becoming increasingly attractive. Not just from a startup or from the startups world and the software world, but also from a patient perspective, because it's all about patient involvement. Patients have now experienced over the last 2 years during the crisis what it means to be disconnected from your physician, disconnected from the hospital, and so on. It also is very attractive for the providers and from the investor's perspective. And on top of this, what you also see is actually that this area is now actually becoming a field which is actually toasted from two big sides. And now I'm talking about the next player, and that is the pharmaceutical industry. This is also something what I had to learn over the last 2 years. My first question was actually 2 years ago. Then I thought, okay, what can be the interest from a pharmaceutical perspective to enter into big data? what can it be to enter and to keep themselves busy with digital therapeutics? Today, the majority of the digital companies, they are either investing internally or they acquiring companies. If they are smart, they acquire startup companies in the field of digital therapeutics. And they are doing this while on the other side, on the big tech side, so the Amazons, the Googles, the Microsoft, and the Apples, they are also striving into this direction using a totally different approach. So you have now these two big worlds. On the one side, you have pharma knowing everything about medicine, about drugs, drug development. On the other side, you have big tech knowing everything about big data. And both parties understand now, okay, good, we will never be good enough to touch each other or to create and to get a certain piece of the cake in the other area. So in this field, that is the field where the digital therapeutics companies are playing. That's the reason why the growth rates, both from an investor's perspective, but also from a company perspective, the regulated environments or regulatory bodies like the FDA, like DiGA in Germany. DiGA is currently the leading regulatory body for these kind of processes. They have also accepted that this is the future, that this is the thing what will stay with us, and what is not a threat. It is complementary, and that is it's a good thing to know.
I remember when Berkshire Hathaway, JP Morgan, and Amazon announced their link up in the healthcare space and sort of tackling healthcare problems. And I guess I haven't sort of followed it closely since, but do you think those big tech players will be able to break through here, or do you think they're going to get caught up in the complexity and the regulation? Because we've seen that in other sectors where there've been sort of dynamics at work that have been underappreciated.
No, I don't think when you look to the different strategies, and you are right. We saw this announcement from companies like Google and also from Microsoft, obviously also from Apple, but they also pulling back because they understand that this is nothing in their knowledge portfolio, and you need much more expertise from this. And so what they are doing is actually they are connecting with the digital therapeutic companies. They're partnering with them. And that is very interesting to see what happened over the last 18 months in terms of M&A processes and partnering processes. So I think the big tech guys, they understand very well that nobody can take it up with them when it comes to big data. And big data is, of course, the key. But as you rightly said, Oliver, they will not make the mistake and will go into the direction of discussing this with the FDA, with the APAC, or with DiGA or BfArM in Germany, or with the NHS. That will never happen. These guys are too smart for that. So that is they will actually buy in and partnering in this kind of knowledge and know-how. And here it's much better placed when they do this via this digital therapeutic startup companies.
Fascinating. I remember we had an investment in a patient compliance business, which was, I remember there was some extraordinary fact, like 80% of medicine prescribed, and I've got the fact wrong, but it was some extraordinary high percentage, never got taken by the patients. They never followed through on it. And so I can see, this is clearly going to be a game changer if you can start to unlock that. I want to.
Yes.
Sorry, go.
Sorry, maybe when I interrupted you, but this is an interesting point of what is actually used and what not. And maybe that gives another dimension to this discussion of digital therapeutics. And quite recently, there was a famous paper from the WHO, which breaks down the determinants of health. And what is written there, and I can quote on this, some of these numbers, which are always in my head, it's that about 20% of the total cost of the determinants of healthcare is actually down to medical care. So that 20%, what doctors and healthcare practitioners do, plus the labs and the drugs, 20%. About 20 to 30% is behavior. That means diet, exercise, lifestyle, positive thinking, quitting smoking, and things like that. And the rest is, of course, is environmental, social, genetic, and physiological. So, as an industry, and I'm in the middle of this healthcare industry, we are focusing only on that 20% of medical care, but we don't care about the behavioral changes. And when I give you, let me give you one example. Diabetes type 1 is not, there's no cure for that. Diabetes type 2 is mainly based on obesity, wrong diet, and so on and so on. So, normally when a patient with diabetes type 2 is diagnosed, they will put him or her on they will check their glucose level frequently. Today it's done with a CGM system, and finally they may end up being on an insulin pump, and just to control their glycemic lines. If you would just give them the advice to lose, let's say 20, 30 kilos, and to do some sport, I will not quote how high this percentage may be. We have some numbers, and there's a lot of scientific papers around this. You would not need this at all. This is, of course, not always in the interest of the diagnostic industry, but of course, if you can compare your therapies with an additional component which is complementary to your treatments in form of a digital process, that it would become a game changer. So I think also from the payer side, there's a lot of advantage. Just as an additional point to your 10% or how many of these prescriptions actually never use, because it's behavioral attitude.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And actually, I mean, I've seen it in other industries. I remember I used to be in sort of invested in education, an investor in education as a sector, and there were often things that we could see were clearly the right thing to do, but actually convincing, in that case, teachers to use the products or devices that we could show research would show it would improve their teaching was actually incredibly difficult to do. And when the sort of theory met practice, it fell down. And actually, we see this a little bit on Neural. We know that Neural drives a better board process. It drives open hiring. It drives more structured assessments. It drives better outcomes. But actually convincing people to change their behaviors is really difficult to do. What are the sort of within the digital therapeutic space? How are you going to overcome that? How are people going to overcome that challenge?
First of all, let me say that I'm very happy that you make this comparison to your company, to Neural, because in preparation of our call, I was thinking about this, and then that we are actually acting in the same world. It's all about a platform. So when you talk about digital therapeutics, it is you will never go for one product and then it's done. You have to create a platform from which out you can address different disease areas. And the end of the story there is there's one big difference already now, that is when you are active in a pharma company developing a new drug, you focus on a patient at the end, but you always focus on patient groups, and you have a cohort of patient which you have in mind. You will never be in contact with this patient. But within a digital therapeutic platform, you are in direct contact with the patient, supported by the physicians, supported by the doctors, and so this is, I think, when we translate this into your world, you've installed now a platform, and you are also in direct contact. The typical executive search guys, they are not in between anymore, and I know what I'm talking about because I'm a member of New Role, and I've experienced it by myself. So why did I do this? And what was the first reaction? First reaction was, of course, interested, and then it moves into excitement because you see, hey, it's much more more pleasant to do this in this way, right? Because there are you are really in the center, and that is also what the patients see. And that is the reason why I mentioned beforehand that this is a realistic step for the first time in the history of healthcare, that this is really personalized medicine, because a patient at the end of the process of the development of an application of a digital therapeutic feels really, it's for me. So this approach, this proposal, this advice is tailor made just for Mr. X or Mrs. Y. No? And I think that is the big difference. And that is to your question. Okay, good. How can you avoid this? I don't want to disappoint you, but it costs time, and so that is the reason why I'm very happy with the development over the last 24 months during Corona or COVID crisis, that people all of a sudden understand. Look at us now. I mean, normally I would sit together with you in the studio. Right? When we talk about Zoom, we talk about Teams, and last week I was in London. I met a colleague of mine. We haven't seen each other for 2 years, and so we saw each other. We met in person after 2 years, and we had the feeling that these were not 2 years. Because why not? Because we saw each other at least every 2 weeks via Zoom. So, and I think that is the triggers here, the experience. And of course, in the digital therapeutics world, it's a little bit more complex, because on the first side you have the patient experience, but what you also need is the experience on the payer side, that you see, wow, that really saves money for us. What you see, what you need to convince the players, like the pharmaceutical industry, like the diagnostic industry, that everybody understands, okay, what's in for me. But I mean, I have been in several changes and innovative processes. Some were successful, despite the fact that it was not just creating winners, but also losers. Some, or the majority, failed because either it was the wrong timing, or there were too many losers, and the parties were too strong to not to allow this, that this would change, would be a change or a game changer. So I don't want to talk too much and then too optimistic about digital therapeutics, but it is the first time in my career that really all the players are optimistic about this, excited about this. All the players can become, if they do it the right way, can become winners of this process. And of course, the most important thing with every innovation is timing. And this is the timing of this innovation is right, but also what we have seen in what was built up in confidence regarding new technologies over the last 2 years.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, I cast my mind back to just before sort of lockdown, and we had started piloting a few sort of online networking events, and it was, people were fiddling around with their microphones, couldn't get their cameras on, etc. And now, people are so adept at, things still go wrong, but when they do, they're just so adept at fixing them now, and it's been a massive learning curve, which I guess does open up huge opportunities in spaces like digital therapeutics. And I want to just go back to something you touched on earlier with a slight sort of change of emphasis. You talked about bringing on board the new CEO, which is obviously one of the most critical roles as a chair that you can play. The sort of selection of the CEO and subsequent sort of onboarding of them. Can you talk us through that? How you thought about that process? What you've learned from previous experiences that you think others would find useful?
It's a somewhat difficult topic because I may be an exception, but actually it is very common that when the chair is changing, there's often also a need to change either the executive team or the CEO. You have also times in the life of a company where the founder is building up the company, and then after several years, you move from a technology development oriented company into a commercial stage company, and that is asking for a different attitude. You also may see that a founder and a CEO founder who started the company may not always be able to grow in the same way like the company is growing. Some stuff. So this is I think it's in every chair of of startup company should be aware that this will come sooner or later. This kind of work, and then of course it's a task of the chair. And then I think the one of the most important things is that you first of all how to deal with the founder CEO, how to make sure that this is a smooth process in terms of an accepted process. So it needs preparation work. You cannot go in and say, look, guys, we came to the conclusion that it's over, and thank you for your hard work, and that's it. So that's number one. Number two is the new CEO, which you would like to hire. I would definitely make sure that this has been done in the same way, like when I'm approached to join a new board as a chair, that the chemistry between the executives and or the new CEO and the non-executives is absolutely perfect. Because creating a conflict from the very beginning, that doesn't work, and that especially counts for the chemistry between the chair and the CEO.
And how do you go about that? Because often, in my experience at that sort of dating phase, everyone is locked into confirmation bias. Someone has decided they like them, and then everyone is looking for all the things. Everyone is on best behavior. They're all looking for the things that they like about the person, and they've sort of become switched off to the possible issues. And often, they're in such a rush to get things done and move on that they're not willing to take the time. So how do you ensure that you've really got that chemistry?
Again, I may be an exception, but what I also see is there's a significant change in the executive search world, as we all know. I mean, look at Nero, look at LinkedIn, and when I look to the processes of how people are currently, or how companies are currently looking into these into searches, that becomes much more personalized. I made the experience that it is often, or it's much better when you know this person already. So it's a natural development over time, where these kind of relationships grow. There's interest in these companies from this future CEO perspective and or person, and I think that is for such a critical position, because you cannot easily correct this. I'm not saying that you can easily correct this if you make a mistake in big corporate, but also I would be interested in the statistics of the nomination of the last 2 years of big corporate CEO positions. What you will see is that the majority is internally recruited. So these are well-known people to the board, and it's also why are they doing this? They know this person, and it's of course risk, kind of risk mitigation, and that is also something what I prefer. So to your engagement period with somebody like that, or with you can't do this with just with 2 or 3 interviews and with a joint dinner, and then you make a decision for such a transformational change. Because let's not forget, it is in big corporate. If you make a big mistake, you can always go for a recall of your products. You can adjust this, but the company will not suffer. Maybe the share price or whatever. And big mistake, putting the wrong person in the position as a CEO of a startup company in a very crucial phase, critical phase, say pre-commercial or just going into the commercial stage. That can be easily the end of the company.
Got it. But how do you get over the? I mean, not many startups have the luxury of time, and having sort of getting to know these people over time. Does that mean that you, as a chair, have to sort of build up a portfolio of people you stayed close to, so that if that need arises, you can go to them, or how do you navigate that?
There's one way to overcome this, and I think that is when it comes to the what I expect from an NED or from an NEC is one of the things is his or her network. So, and that is continuously it should be brought into the game. But also when you come at this kind of a critical point, it should be an easy access, a relatively easy exercise for a group of 5 to 6 board members with a huge network around the globe to say, look, we are in a critical situation, and we play now the card of our network and our connections, and we will take the role as an executive search and look into this, because we are under time pressure. We need somebody. Another option is, I haven't been in this situation, but colleagues of mine who also act as chair or NEDs, that somebody from the board jumps in and fills this role for a certain period of time. I know this is asking a lot. It's asking a lot from somebody, but that's a question of how deep are the board members engaged, and are they capable to do this? Do they have the time for this? But I think in a very critical period of time, that should always be possible, because it is also not. I don't hope that happens to somebody, but you can also have an accident as a CEO, and then it's all of a sudden you're not there anymore. And how do you feel this? Do you then go out under time pressure and say, look, we have to fill this gap as soon as possible, or do we do this in the best interest of the shareholders and the best interest of the company, and do this in a structured approach, executive search, or but take the time, because quick and dirty is that's too dangerous for these kind of processes.
Yeah. You touch there a little bit on tapping into the collective wisdom of the board, and you talked earlier a little bit about the sort of composition of investor directors versus industry experts. Can you talk a little bit more about how you think about the board composition as a chair, and how you build your boards? What do you think you need in terms, especially with regard to these startups, in terms of size and sort of diversity of members?
Yes, thank you. Let me start maybe with size, because I think that is often a mistake, and because there is a trend or tendency to bring too many people on board, and the bigger the better. And the moment when the number of board members is larger than the numbers of employees in the company, that's obviously the point where you should think twice about appointing the next director. And so it's just a little bit overdone. But I have been in companies where this was very close, and where we then were asking ourselves the question, does it make sense? The size is also important in terms of efficiency and effectiveness of the board. And the problem here is obviously that that it's often driven from the financial community side, because every new investor who is brought on board, you start with a seed round, and then everything is fine, and then you bring the first either friends and family to the board, or a family office, or an angel investor, and who keeps silent. Then you go into the Series A round, and you have the first institutional investors, and then they claim, of course, a board seat, either as a director or as either as an NED or as an observer. And in fact, it doesn't matter, because everybody counts, and everybody has, to a certain extent, a voice in the board. So this is often leading to a creation of a big board, but also an unbalanced board, because you have then, on the one side, you have this dominating part of the representation of the financial community, and this is what I see often in the startup phase. And what I tell the CEOs who have actually the task to build up the board is actually start from the very beginning, and also balances this number of people. Don't allow everybody from the financial side to join your board. Build up your shareholder agreements in a certain way, and then look for knowledge, expertise, and also knowledge and expertise build up actually in the industry. But it doesn't make sense to bring somebody in from a truck manufacturer history into a healthcare business or a medtech business, and also look forward to what you will need in the future. And let me come back for a second to the digital therapeutics companies. I would give them now the advice also to bring in somebody from the big tech world, from the pure software world, and that's one point. The other point of board composition is very important for me, and I was touching on this earlier when we were talking about the relationship between CEO and the chair, and that's chemistry. So the chemistry between the board members. Nothing more difficult and dangerous than a dysfunctional board, because they don't like each other. They don't accept each other. So also when you bring this industry experts as an NED to the board, combine them with the venture capital or private equity representatives, it should be always on eye height, and it should be in a healthy platform for exchange and discussions, so that the financial representatives, that they listen to what's going on there on the other side, that they listen how does this industry work actually, where we invested our money into. But there's also the industrial side is listening to the financial side, and is accepting that they have maybe from time to time totally different objectives, and that they have to look for their money, and the other one have to look for the technology side. So the one side, there's no side more important, and but it's too important to leave it to one side.
How do you foster that balance? What are the things that you do? Because I've seen that a lot actually, where you get a split. Often it's just between investors themselves creating a split. Do you do a lot of work outside the boardroom to sort of foster greater social ties, or what are the things that you do?
No, I think that is somewhat dangerous if you do this outside. I mean, I don't know if I understand this question in the right way, because if you do this outside and then dealing on the one side or partly with the let's call it the industry side, the knowledgeable part of that side, and then later you discuss financial topics with the VC representatives, and then you try to combine this. That may work from time to time, but I would not be happy. Let's say I can actually do this as a chair, but if I put myself in the shoes of an NED, and I would figure out that there are separate discussions outside the boardroom, which eventually lead to a different or an interruption of the strategy. I don't think that for me it would not be acceptable, and I would also assume that also not from the other side.
Yeah, sorry. So I was thinking more. One of the things I think, particularly in an online environment, that we've seen and I've seen on the boards that I sit on, is that it's a very intense exchange online. And whereas in an in-person meeting, you have those opportunities to break, have a defuse moment, while people are getting drinks or going to the bathroom or whatever. When you're online, those tensions can sort of fester. And so, what we've been trying to do is create more opportunities for more of a social interaction, more of an casual interaction. So, going for dinner together, going and doing some sort of learning experience together, a little bit like you would with an executive team, in order to sort of build the sort of the trust and the psychological safety that actually when you're in the boardroom, it can be harder to do.
Absolutely right, Oliver. And let me give you an example. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, I was also in London. We had a board meeting with one of my boards, and for the very first time, we met again in person. And you cannot imagine the way how we were welcoming each other, the way how the discussion went. It was a totally different atmosphere, and we had not this typical, okay, I can't say it now, I have to because the other one is just speaking online. There was much more interaction, much more direct interaction, and also what afterwards we discussed it also, and what we also recognized was that there are certain things which you can't see in an online discussion. And then and we all felt very sorry because after the board meeting, we went in all directions because we said, look, why did we not reserve in a restaurant today? Because that would have been a perfect event today after a really fruitful, encouraging board meeting where also the executive team was, of course, present, and then go out and then do it in a less formal way, but more informal, and have some fun together. So I think that is something what is absolutely necessary, and then that is also the reason why where I can influence this as a chair, and where I also encourage the CEOs in preparation of the board meetings is that there is either the night before or after the board meeting that there's a social event scheduled, and also some individual meetings before the board, which can take place in the afternoon, but the individual meetings can take place in the morning. No, it's absolutely necessary and necessary for a good board composition.
Okay, great. And just maybe one last question before we move to the quick fire. I'm fascinated to know how you think about performance managing your boards. One of the things, again, that I often talk to sort of other founders and sort of scale up CEOs about is the dysfunctional nature of their boards, and they don't know how to get rid of underperforming board members. What's your approach to that challenge?
First of all, I know from other boards, of course, there are formal processes and how to assess the board performance. In my practice, it's normal that this is done annually with 360-degree tools, and where we judge each other and also get our feedback from the executive team and so forth. But it doesn't go further from a formal perspective when it comes to my boards. But there's definitely frequently an open exchange on this, and then also the let's say measurement of my expectations or what I expect from a board member, and that is these are different things. That is, for example, that how active is this person involved, and when it comes to, for example, challenging, I don't like board members who are just there for the challenge, because that's so easy. So challenging is fine. Challenging is absolutely necessary, but please do it always in combination with an advice. It's like, I shouldn't say this, but it's a little bit like feeding up your kids. You also have to say, hey, you should not do this, but then tell them, okay, how do you do this better? The other part is that it's also an important part for me. I mentioned this already. It's the network. How active do they actually help the executive team, the CEO, to make best use of them? Not to abuse them, but to make use of them and use of their network. So are they always accessible? And the third part of my measurement of the board performance is actually how much work takes place. And that's not always measured in hours or days or whatever, but how much work is actually taking place between the board meetings. That's also important for me, and that's also one part of the matrix where we all should look into, because today's world is too complex, and we should not leave the executives alone, but should also be accessible and are active supporting them between the board meetings, and not just showing up 6 times per year and then playing a challenging role.
Yeah, it's one of the big problems we often see actually boards having, where they've got board members with big names, great CVs, but ultimately haven't got enough time to do the role and engage. And often the sort of early stage organizations are better off with the person who can really commit the time, who might not have quite as big a name, but actually is sufficiently engaged in the organization to be able to apply themselves. So that resonates a lot. Fantastic. Okay, well, that's great. Well, we're going to move on to the 5-question quickfire, if that's all right. So, first question for you is what's the book that has most influenced your thinking as a board member?
Difficult question, because to be honest, I'm not really influenced when it comes to my board memberships by books. Maybe by biographies from good leaders. And when I look into good leaders, I'm always fascinated by people with a great ratio of EQ and IQ. I had the pleasure to work with 2 or 3 where I really said, look, guys, they have this perfect ratio, and looking to their life and looking to the way of working, I think that it's more an orientation. Um, yeah, there's one book which comes to my mind, and that is actually Thinking Fast and Slow from Kahneman.
Your favorite quote?
That's back into my times when I was working in South Africa, and I had the super experience by meeting. I was not really meeting him, but I was together with him in one room, Nelson Mandela. And since then, I have this. It's actually in my back. What you see it there. This is following me since then. It always seems impossible until it's done. Very easy.
Love it. Your favorite ever holiday?
Going back to the same place where I was just talking about, so the entire southern part of Africa. I used to be there at least once per year. As I said, I worked there in South Africa, but during the last 2 years it was difficult. And so it's RSA, it's Namibia and Botswana, this triangle.
And is there one particular location within that specific location where if you could go back again?
The desert in Namibia, or the farm in the bushveld of in South Africa.
Your favorite app?
Or everything what has to do with social media, so WhatsApp, Signal, and my third app is because of my work with China, you can't survive without WeChat. So when I look to my weekly review of my iPhone, what has been used most, I think 99% are these three apps.
Fantastic. And your best financial investment idea for 2022?
Oliver, you're not asking me seriously, or what? I mean, I'm still looking for that, but I can give you a lot of bad examples.
Any particular theme?
Yeah, always. That's not a theme which I have taken from any book or so, but when I think about this, I would say uh, keep on running, even if your innovative ideas are not successful at the time. There will be a time that this idea will become successful. Innovation is such a difficult field, and that is also the reason why I'm talking so excited about digital therapeutics, because I know I was a believer since 20 years in this this would happen, and now it's there.
Got it. Meinhard, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure and fascinating getting your insights. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
No, I have to thank you, because it was the pleasure was on my side, and thank you also for this challenging questions, and I hope that I could add any value to the discussion.
Definitely. Thank you.